by the dead. Everybody says, well, it's a corporation. A corporation is a corpse orating. Okay, so we
Mm.
look at the words. So the corpse, that's the dead speaking. Okay.
Wow.
Now, when we look at us as spirits in the flesh here, we are of the living trust. They call us the creator God, the divine, God's living trust. And this is very important because we are in that trust. And let's be clear, some people may or may not know what a trust is, but it's very simple. You have a grantor who grants something in a trust. And I always think of it as a box. It's very simple. The grantor puts things in the box.
Mhm.
That's the trust. That becomes the estate or the res, okay, the property in the trust. Now, then you have a trustee and he administers the trust. He has to obey the governing law, whatever that indenture, whatever is written inside that trust is called the law of the trust, the governing law. Okay. And then you have the beneficiaries, and in this case, we're going to say heirs. They hold the highest position in a trust because they they are supposed to benefit from the trust, and they have use of everything in the trust and the
Mhm.
estate. And in this case, we are of the Creator, so we're actually part of the estate. So this is very important to comprehend that structure, okay? Because this is where all of our authority comes from. So
Yes.
now that we've defined what the issue is in the realm that we are living in a spiritual realm. It is governed by trust law, equity law, okay? And equity is quite a large body of law.
Hmm.
So let's define equity. Equity is of right conscience, of the heart. So first, God reads the heart. What's your intention? Is it pure? If I steal a baseball hat from John down the street, every time I put that hat on, I know I took it from him.
Mm.
That's right conscience. That's your conscience speaking.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, so that's love. If I want to stay in love, I have to do what? Be truthful. You have to be honest. Come with clean hands, they call it. So I'm
Hmm.
coming with honor, integrity, truthfulness, forgiveness, mercy. All of these things are part of equity. So that's trust. So love, in order to have love, a loving relationship with anybody, it's trust first. And how do you have trust? It's based on truth. Do you have a question?
Exactly. No, no. You're really breaking it down. It's beautiful how you're kind of going into the verbiage and how it really is supposed to be interrelated. Because you think of a trust, it's about trusting. And then putting the love, which is each of us as the heirs, we're supposed to be like participants, a part of it. So it's so beautiful how you kind of explain that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's spot on. You're getting it. I'm glad. So that's makes me very happy that you're that you're comprehending that,
Mhm.
and it's really all about trust. So in trust law, and it's the law of equity. So when I stated that love is equity in principle, morality is equity in action. Morality and equity equals merciful judgment, always mercy. Okay, they have an opportunity to repent, to confess, and ask for forgiveness. Okay, and it's up to the heir to forgive. Some things can be forgiven, some things can't. Right? There's certain things that they're going to have to be held accountable for, not liable, accountable. These are terms in equity, very important. Um, so when we look at what's really going on, you have the Lucifer's trust, which is a dead trust. The money that system that we're on, it's a debt slavery bondage system. Okay. And then we have the living trust. Okay. And if you look at every zombie movie you ever seen, anything about zombies, what do the zombies do? They
They eat
eat the
on the
living,
living. Yes,
right? They
yes.
feed off the living.
That's
So they're
right.
parasitic. They cannot survive off the, without the living. So Luciferian trust, you got to really look at this. I'm not religious. I study law, so I study ancient text. Okay,
Hmm.
so when I start looking at this and I say, do they have the authority? Does Lucifer have authority over the living, God's children, God's heirs? No, they don't. Okay, so you say, well, how do I bring that forth? Right? And in America, we did something phenomenal. You always hear, why is America great? Well, America's great. Well, why is it great? What's this thing, the Declaration of Independence? Why was it so great? Why are we looking at a new form of government? We don't have a monarchy. We don't have, a parliament, those types of things, right? Well, the Declaration of Independence is actually a declaration of trust.
Oh.
It's an equity. So it's a declaring a new trust and a civilian trust, actually. And it's also a bill in equity because we're removing the king, who is a tyrant. The tyrant actions of the king, let's define what a king is. A king is supposed to be administering God's trust, the living trust.
Hmm.
And when he does things that don't fall in line with that, he's in breach of trust. Now you remove him through a bill in equity, and that's part of what Declaration of Independence is.
Hmm.
Okay, all trust law. So when we look at, I said it was an extension, the creator, the settler, he being God's children, God's heirs. No, they don't. Okay. So you say, well, how do I bring that forth? Right. And in America, we did something phenomenal. You always hear, why is America great? Well, America's great. Well, why is it great? What's this thing, the Declaration of Independence? Why was that so great? Why are we looking at a new form of government? We don't have a monarchy. We don't have, a parliament, those types of things, right? Well, the Declaration of Independence is actually a declaration of trust.
Oh.
Okay. And it's an equity. So it's a declaring a new trust and a civilian trust, actually. And it's also a bill in equity because we're removing the king, who is a tyrant. The tyrant actions of the king, let's define what a king is. A king is supposed to be administering God's trust, the living trust.
Hmm.
And when he does things that don't fall in line with that, he's in breach of trust. Now you remove him through a bill in equity, and that's part of what Declaration of Independence is.
Hmm.
Okay, all trust law. So when we look at, I said it was an extension, the utmost high trust there is the living trust that God gave us because he's the creator. He is the creator, the settler. He puts things into the trust, the whole earth, the land, air, and water, and us. He created us, and he put it in trust for us to use as heirs. Okay?
Yes.
So this is really important. I don't want to get too far off track, but there is a trustee. This is really important because uh, I'm being cautious here because there are trigger words that we've been brainwashed. I was brainwashed. Who is
Mhm.
Jesus? What's this all about? I
Well, we're
don't.
socially conditioned every day. We're socially conditioned by social media, our government, our school, academia, everything socially engineers us to have.
TV,
Yeah, everything. Yeah, yeah,
everything.
absolutely.
So, and there's a reason why they conditioned us away from that is because it is where our authority comes from.
Mhm. Absolutely.
So, you initially asked me, how do we, solve this problem we're in with government and so on. So first we had to establish where all authority comes from. It's divine authority coming forth, the laws of nature, nature's God under divine providence. That's God's divine law. In trust law, that would be when we look at the Bible, it's actually the record of the trust. And I don't use King James.
This is Water for Your Mind with Aashtat. I welcome you as we walk together through the velvet rope to intelligent thinking. Caveat disclaimer. All matters, ideas, terminologies, and likeness is copywritten for this broadcast. If you are interested in working with Aashtat or want to use any concept discussed here and or its likeness, contact Aashtat at matriarchendeavors@protonmail.com. That is the word matriarch, the word endeavors with an S, at protonmail.com. I thank you in advance for all donations to Cash App $ Auset Ma'at Ayita. That's AUSET MAATAYITA. Today we're going to talk about what is equity. And we're going to dive a little bit into what the meaning of equity is and why it is a word with way more power, usage, and leverage than you can ever imagine this word to be. Before I dive a little bit into equity, we're going to talk or share a little bit about the definition and etymology of the word equity. So equity is a noun, and the etymology meaning or definition or history of this word, it started in early 14th century, and equity was created in those times, in that history point, to mean quality of being equal or fair, impartial in dealing with others, and it's from Old French equit, 13th century, from Latin nominative equitius, meaning equality, uniformity, conformity, symmetry, fairness, equal rights, kindness, moderation. Now, the definition of equity is also defined as a noun, and the definition of equity is a system of law originating in the English Chancery and comprising a settled and formal body of legal and procedural rules and doctrines that supplement, aid, or override common statute law and are designed to protect rights and enforce duties fixed by substantive law. So basically, another way to define this word equity is a body of legal doctrines and rules developed to enlarge, supplement, or override a narrow, rigid system of law. Now, equity is basically it's looked at as a legal terminology or legal ideology, yet equity is very dynamic. And equity can be utilized whether in the mind or whether in legal doctrine to define something of value, something that is to be looked at, dealt with, presented, acted in, or acted together of something that inquires fairness, kindness, the ability to see both sides of the scale, both sides of what's to the left and what is to the right. And this podcast, though it will be very short, I just wanted to give an overview of what is equity. And equity from a legal terminology perspective is implied as a fairness. And equity is actually given or created in legal terminology and the legal sector as a governing of people, or to govern the people, or it governs people. Equity, that is. And equity is also viewed in legal terminology as a standard in performance. Now, the bigger picture of why I decided to create this podcast and talk a little bit about equity, because there are going to be several podcasts that I'm going to create that talks about the law of contracts and what is a contract. And I wanted to start with the understanding and dive a little bit into the knowledge of what is equity, because it's going to be hugely important in the future in tying these ideologies together. So the purpose of equity is to know that equity is usually used in the terminology when concerning law. And there are different kinds of laws. You have commercial law, you have family law, you have business law. And though there are different sectors of law and how people that are governed by a specific nation or government apply these laws in different ways. And if one does not understand or have knowledge of what equity is and the value of equity when dealing in law or dealing in a contract, they are not going to be privy to the power and the range of what equity can do for you specifically. And I'm going to tie this a little bit into the commercial side of law and wanted to touch a little bit about that, because when one has equity, meaning fairness, based off that definition of the word, based off the etymology of the word equity, meaning quality of being equal or fair, we can see how we can run into a misunderstanding or a problem or an issue when dealing in law or dealing in contracts. Now, there are many types of contracts, right? There are paper contracts, there are verbal contracts, there are unspoken contracts, but I'm talking specifically about paper contracts. Very similar to a job application, very similar to, let's say, a marriage contract, very similar to a business contract where you have a partnership involved. And equity is that foundational essence, that spirit of working with one entity being as something that is equal to you. And if one is not aware of the power of equity, one can go into a contract thinking that they have equity and they don't. So equity in the mindset or the perspective of law, the legal piece, right? It's very, very, very important to understand the value and understand the meaning or know the knowledge of what this word actually means to know if one is moving in a contract with fairness, to know if one is moving in a contract of like-mindedness. And why is that important? Well, I'm going to talk a little bit, very, very quick overview how this ties into the commercial world when we're dealing in business and we're dealing with transactions, whether they're donations or payments of the such. What most people are unaware of is that law determines the nature of a transaction. And since law predates the actual transaction, meaning payments and currency and things of that nature, one would need to understand the nature of a law and why a law was created and what is a law to understand the nature of a transaction. And law usually persuades and motivates, leads and influences commercial transactions. I'll give you an example. Currency is considered wealth, or it can be communicated such as an economic position. Now, if one does not have equity, because I'm tying equity into this perspective, if one does not have equity at law, then there's no way to have equity in a commercial transaction. Now, I'm going to leave it there because there's definitely more that I want to talk about regarding this exact topic. But this podcast is specifically teaching about the power and range and the reality of what equity is, the definition of what equity is, the etymology of what equity is, so that it can sit in your mind from an intellectual perspective to know exactly what it is and its meaning and its value and purpose for you. I thank you for listening to the podcast. If you are interested in working with Aashtat, you can email Aashtat at matriarchendeavors@protonmail.com. If you would like to donate to receive a copy of Rising Through the Transition, which is a memoir, at matriarchendeavors@protonmail.com for $24.99, shipping is included. The memoir is a personal story of my ascension and growth in embracing my own authenticity and living and speaking my personal truths from my life's journey. I hope when purchasing this memoir, it inspires you for your journey as well. Thank you and see you soon.
This is Matriarch Endeavor's YouTube channel. We welcome you. Thank you for watching.